Good morning, everyone. My name is Douglas Morrow, founder and senior engineer here at TruePath Technologies. To my left, I have Patrick Byrne, who is the DevOps manager. Anything that gets super technical, I'll just look to him and hope that he can answer it for us. I'm guessing it's still a little early for everyone here. I had a great night last night, so bear with me. Drink some more water. We'll be okay. Again, I've started TruePath Technologies. We're based out of the United States in upstate New York, coming to about 14 years. We specialize in configuring and maintaining customers' monitoring tool, the proud author of the O'Reilly SNMP book. And we've been partners and friends and coworkers with Checkmk for a long time now. Today we're going to talk about Grafana. Grafana is a beautiful tool, and before we start though, I'm just wondering how many people have or are using Grafana today? Absolutely awesome, good. So for those that don't know, Grafana is a web-based graphing engine. Really, you can think of it as a front-end graphing framework. The big thing about Grafana is that there's really nothing in the back end as far as what to graph. It really is just the visualization piece. And so what we're going to learn today is how we can back-end load that with all of the Checkmk data and analytics. And on the latter half of the presentation, Lars is actually going to come up and finish this off and tell us about a new release of a plugin for it, which is going to be great. So Grafana is web-based dashboards. We're going to show some of the interactiveness of it. And it's open source, Golang. But really, this is where the money is right here. This is really what customers want. They want to be able to see data in a whole bunch of different ways. We do a lot of services with graphs, and one of the tough things is that you have so many pieces here. And so a lot of the times what we'll do is we will talk with customers and say, okay, we have all the data. We're starting to pull it. Checkmk can do a lot of great things with all these services and whatnot. But then the question becomes is how do you want to represent that data? And when you're done, you'll find that you've got like 500 different answers, right? And Grafana allows you to represent that data in a lot of different ways. So you have your typical bar charts, your aggregated charts, you can zoom in, you've got alerting, you've got stacked charts, you've got anything and everything you can really think of. One of the other powers that Grafana has is the ability to aggregate data from different sources. So what happens is that you get to these customers that want that infamous single pane of glass, and we're always talking about it, and I thought that it would go away, years and years ago, but we're still looking for it. And so what happens is they say, well, our network operations center has this, and it's great, and we've got all this great Checkmk data on here, and we've got our hosts up and down and our throughputs and all that, but I want to show some of our CRM data. I want to also be able to show some of our logging. I want to be able to show some of our Salesforce metrics that are in there. And that's the great thing about Grafana is that you can have all these different data sources and represent it all on one dashboard. And that's really what we're sort of seeing here is that you can take all of this and you don't have to just have one data source. You can have it coming in from all different places there. And it also has a lot of different data types, I guess, or the way that we ingest the data. And we're going to learn that right here is that we've got the different data sources, InfluxDB, Azure, MySQL, it goes on and on. And so we're not just limited by a single protocol or a single data source. And again, that gets to the power of the Grafana is that it really is more than just a visualization, but it's more a framework that allows you to represent data in a lot of different ways. So what does this look like? How do we build this? Well, on the top, we've got our typical Checkmk. And we have an InfluxDB, and then we have Grafana sitting down here. And so InfluxDB is where we're going to push all of the performance data. And that's using a protocol called Graphite. So Checkmk can speak Graphite natively. It pushes the data over into InfluxDB, and then Grafana goes ahead and queries the InfluxDB. This is sort of how it looks today, right? CMC core, InfluxDB, Grafana does that, and Lars is going to end up showing us how we can do this. So we're going to have the new Checkmk as a data source. Question becomes, how do we set this up? Okay, how many servers do we need? How do we architect this? Very simply, we can take it and throw everything onto a single server. Easy as that. We've got Checkmk, InfluxDB, Grafana all sitting on here. We can break it up. This is more of a typical installation, at least ones that we see. You've got Checkmk on your own server, Influx and Grafana on the other. You can have a fully HA as you can imagine here. A couple of Checkmk appliances, load balance InfluxDBs. You've got Grafana websites, load balance, multiple SQL servers, a load balancer in the front. So this thing can really scale. So what is InfluxDB? Really, it's a time series database. It natively supports Graphite. Checkmk supports Graphite. That's all good. Efficient storage, open source. In a lot of ways, people say, oh, geez, another database, do I have to learn this? Quite frankly, InfluxDB is sort of the middleman. There's not a lot that you have to do. Grafana knows it. Checkmk knows it. You don't really need to do a lot with it. We'll show you later on how you can query it a little bit just to see how some of the data is stored, but in a lot of ways, this ends up being very transparent to us. Some of the system requirements, how much should I build, how much should I dedicate as I'm building this out. We've got a hardware sizing guide there that you can look through. Installation is pretty simple. Go install the package, find the endpoints here, enable it, identify the database, start the Influx database service. Not very difficult. Checkmk configuration here. You really have two pieces. You've got the RRDs, and then you have the Graphite. So what happens is that the microcore goes, and when it starts to push the data out, it's going to push it out to both pieces. If it can't talk to one of it, it's just going to ignore it and move on. It's not going to hold up the whole system. But the big piece here is that you're seeing that it's pushing it out to both of them. It's not going to one, and then it's going to the other. Here's what the configuration looks like. Again, really straightforward. In the next piece here, I've got a video that will actually show us how to go through this. I'm going to zoom in. And you go into the global settings down here. You'll see there's a link that says send metrics to Graphite. We're going to put the IP address of the Graphite server in there. Save it. You'll see it's in there. Activate the changes. Couldn't be any easier. One of the pieces is that we need to make sure that we can talk to the Influx database directly. If we have a remote server, right, we can't just proxy through the master server itself. So if we have a remote sitting up here, it has to actually go and speak to the Influx database directly through the VPN. Once we have the InfluxDB up, Checkmk is starting to send data through it. You can go in and me just move this down. Go here and say show databases. So you'll go in here and you'll look and see the CheckMK database within the InfluxDB. Use the CheckMK, show the series, and you can see the keys sitting here. The way that it is stored within here is that you have the name of the host and then the service check right after that. And we're going to see how we're going to actually use that later when we're going to generate graphs. That is about, I think, the most that you need to learn from the InfluxDB, quite frankly. So how do we install Grafana? I wish there was a lot more glitz and glamour to it, but in a lot of ways it couldn't get any easier. You go down, install the package. There's an installation. Obviously, start the Grafana service. And one thing to note is it binds to 3000. If you're putting it on the same server that has a port 80, you want to switch those around. It uses SQLite 3 to store its configuration. Again, in a lot of ways, that's like the other database. Not a lot that you have to do to know that. It supports some other databases. I'm not too sure if a lot of people even switch databases outside of that. There's not much configuration. I mean, there is a lot of configuration, but from a size of a database, looking at an Oracle or MySQL or whatnot, it really isn't that big of a database. So I'm not sure. I haven't seen too many people that move off of that for whatever reason. So the question then becomes is how do we see the CheckMK data within the Grafana, right? We have CheckMK set up. We have it pushing out its data to Graphite. We have the Grafana service that now needs to know how to ingest that through Graphite. And so as we see CheckMK here, as we saw before, we see it showing these series that are sitting in here like this. So now what we need to do is we need to go in and we need to add a data source. So Grafana is sitting there, and again, there's really nothing you can graph in a way within Grafana without having some sort of data source. Again, it's just a framework. So now we need to go in and add a data source into Grafana, and that's what we're going to do right here. Is we're going to go in and we're going to name it. We're going to set the URL for the InfluxDB, and then we're going to go ahead and save and test that. So on the next screen here, we'll go through and we'll just show you what that looks like real quick. So go into Data Sources, add InfluxDB. That's the name of the database. And guess what? That was it. So now we have everything talking to each other. We've got CheckMK pushing its data out through InfluxDB. Right? We have Grafana that has now identified a data source that is the InfluxDB that CheckMK is pushing through. So now the question becomes, well, okay, well now that we have all this data sitting in there, how do we make our first visualization? How do we create a widget? How do we go ahead and actually make something that looks pretty? And there's really a couple ways to do it. I'm going to show you this next. But what I want to show you here is that when you go in, there's some of these buttons that you can rifle through here. And there's the main sort of magic that happens right here. And as we add the query, we're going to be making changes in this area here. And when we're done, you'll see the data being represented above it. And this is what the query looks like right here. And again, all this is going to be available online. And really, we wanted to have these little screencasts so that when you download it online, you'll be able to follow through. So we're going to go in and say create dashboard. We're going to add a new query, and we're going to go down and we're going to pick the query from Checkmk. We're going to start typing our host name, and we're going to bring that up. We're going to change the null values to say that we want them to be connected. Change the title to be CPU utilization. And what I do want to do is it went pretty quick by here. Let me show you as we start to do this measurement here. Okay, and this is really where we're going to start picking the pieces that we want to graph. So as I start typing things in here, it's going to auto-complete that data. And we're going to see that we've got a query here from the InfluxDB Checkmk. So that's really where the magic happens, is as I start to type it, see it starts saying edge router, and you'll see that it completes it here in orange. And I clicked on CPU utilization there. We changed the null values to connected, change the panel. Go ahead and change it. And that's what we look like. So one of the things I want to show you as we have these just want to show you a couple of other examples that are sitting out there today. If you go and just Google Grafana demo, they have a great little site called play.grafana.org. And they do a wonderful job at showing all the different pieces and different ways to represent data. And these are all things that you can use today. It's free, it's open source, it works absolutely beautiful with Checkmk data. But as you go through here, you can really start to get some ideas and some examples. If I go into graph styles, you can really see all the different ways to represent it. You can zoom into these areas, have mixed styles, you can show thresholds on them. One of the things we're going to learn a little bit later is that you can set up access and authorizations to these tools to allow people to see only certain graphs and certain setups. So that should start get the juices flowing on the kinds of things and kinds of visualizations you can show within Checkmk. Now the question becomes, well, how do I really integrate this? Now do I have to go and I have to, change Checkmk and configure it? Then I got to go to Grafana and go ahead and change and configure all of this and sort of do double the work here. And the answer is no. You can set up what are called variables, and we're going to show you how to integrate an icon within Checkmk so that you can click on it and jump right to a Grafana graph. But one of the first things that we need to do is we need to set up a variable. And the variable is going to be something that we can pass information to through the URL. So in a lot of ways, if you look at this right here, you can see that this is the Grafana server. Here is the host name that we're going to pass it, monitor 01. And we can dynamically now show monitor 01's information. So you could have this dashboard with all sorts of information in it. You could show the CPU and the memory and the utilization. You can show annotations, alerts, downtimes, all about that one host name, monitor 01. And then, as you can imagine, we'll simply take the name of the host that we're currently showing on Checkmk, and we'll pass that to Grafana to quickly show that dashboard. So this is really where the magic is right here. Hostname equals monitor01. And if you go through the settings of this, and really this is just going through these settings here, so I'm going to skip that video, but it's really showing how we're setting up this variable host name and how it's going to end up resolving into the monitor01. And what we're going to do now is we're going to add that action to Checkmk. So this is going to be what we're going to end up with right here. So we should all be very used to seeing a bar like this. But now I want to add this little icon here. And when I click on this little Grafana icon, I'm going to pass it the host name. So I'm going to go ahead and show this one because I think this one is really important. So I'm going to start searching for actions. And you see here, custom icons and actions. Add a new element. Call it Grafana. And here's where we're going to put the action in. And the host name, the var-host name, is what we're going to be passing to Grafana. And here is where we're going to integrate these variables that Checkmk knows about, right? So as I'm looking at a dashboard, as I'm looking at something within Checkmk, and I go to click on it, it knows the host that I'm talking about. And it knows the host based on this variable here. So here's my Grafana, my demo dashboard, the variable that I created called var-hostname, and here's where I'm going to be passing that. And there's another one in there that I added, which is the address and host address. So add the new element. We want to show it in the column. Save it, apply it, and now you have your icon that you can jump to. Of course, the actions can be rule-based. We can customize the variables and the URLs for different types of hosts. We can add all of those different pieces in there very easily based on rules. And again, you can start to see and think about all the different data sources that you could be combining out there. You can aggregate it from really any other types of data sources that are out there. Quite frankly, you can just grab anything that's within a MySQL database and start pulling that in. Leveraging the variables within Grafana and Checkmk and the rules allow you to start to create template dashboards so that you really only have to do it one time. You go out there, you generate the dashboards, you want to have the look and feel a certain way, and then using the variables allows you to then just jump into that without having to create 1,000 different graphs. One of the integrations that I did want to show, and there is a section on the boards out there for NTOP and NTOP NG, And one of the things that we see customers asking all the time is say, well, this is great. You've given me a graph of my throughput. Thank you very much. But now I need to know what type of traffic is going over it. I need a little bit of deep packet inspection. I need to know that 98% of my traffic is YouTube traffic or Facebook traffic or whatnot. And NTOP has some products, one of them being NTOP NG. And guess what? You can integrate it within Grafana. So now not only can we have a graph that shows us the throughput based on Checkmk's polling, but using NTOP, we can actually see what kind of traffic. DNS, SSH, web traffic, all sorts of good stuff down here. So what we can do now is we can go into Grafana and we can create a chart. I'm going to show this here. And this is going to allow us to go in and generate a new dashboard using a particular variable. So I'm going to add the query, and this time I'm going to choose NTOP for the query. I'm going to select the metric. That's the address of the host that we want to talk about. We're going to edit the graph there. And here we're just moving some of the charts and graphs around. You can see that you can move them around, move it to the right. And now you can see to the right-hand side that we've added NTOP's information. So on the left-hand side, we have a typical CPU utilization that we got from Checkmk, right? That's great. And you can imagine all the other widgets, dashboards, visualizations that you could have on this. But in one page now, not only do we have, which doesn't really go along with the CPU utilization, or maybe it does. We've got certain peaks and valleys here, and we like to correlate that to the type of traffic that is going across: NetFlow, DNS, SNMP, SSL. So now with this and with Grafana, we can really integrate. So in a lot of ways, people ask us today, can you do flow within Checkmk? And our answer is yes, we can. And we just use it through Grafana. We need to have, from a sales perspective, the ability to say yes, really yes to anything. And so when people ask us these kinds of questions, we say, yeah, we sure can. And what's really great about Grafana is the eye candy. Customers absolutely love it, right? That's what they want to show. That's what they want to see. So let me come back out of this and just finish up with a couple other notes around account management. One of the things that we see with customers is it's not just for administrators, right? This isn't something where you need to be root, you got to be an admin to be able to access it and get into all that. You have the ability to use LDAP and OAuth integrations and all that good stuff. But the big piece is that you can have multi-user setups so that you can go through and set up teams and users. And a lot of times customers don't want to even get into Checkmk. They don't want to get into NTOP. They don't want to get into Salesforce. They just want to have that dashboard. We have to have something up on our big screen within our NOC. We want to be able to have just that one screen. We've got level 1 network administrators. We've got management. God help us, we don't want management to be into Checkmk poking around. We want to just have a screen that shows them the business flow. And you can do that all through Grafana. So a lot of easy ways to automate setting up graphs, using variables, using its web API, and the customizations, there's tons of them. I just showed you some examples. I highly suggest going in and playing around in the Grafana demo. They've got a wonderful setup that shows what's new. There's a lot of different ways to show information, polystats, pie charts, heat maps, text. You can do annotations, which is great. There's ways to annotate downtime within Checkmk, outages within Checkmk, into the graphs if you'd like, so that when you see some of these annotations that are on here, you can go ahead and add that. You may be able to say that this was when we changed the CPU, this is when we had a DDoS attack, and allows you then to go back and put annotations and some informations around it. You can make it as interactive as you like. You don't really need to use just the widgets that they have. There's ways to, almost like NagViz, to where you can add your own images, add overlays on top of it. So this is an example of a turbine state, being able to see when things are online, offline, ready, and have overlays on top of it. So hopefully I've got about 1 minute left here before I invite Lars to come up. Go on our site. Again, we are based out of North America in New York. We specialize in selling and supporting Checkmk. We absolutely love the tool. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Lars, and then we'll take some questions and answers right after that.